Code Interpreter is really useful for working with media. So if you have videos, if you have audio files, if you have collections of images, working with all of them, you can do a lot of things really quickly. So you could absolutely go into a program and try to create some batch process or try to manually do things in one of these tools. But Code Interpreter is super powerful for going and kind of exploring media and creating new types of ideas. So I'm going to give you an example of this. So I've taken a video of my son biking. He loves to go and do BMX racing and do dirt jumps and all kinds of interesting things. And so I've uploaded this video, and I'm going to do a simple extraction. I'm going to take 10 frames out of this video, and then I'm going to do some things with them. And you can go and play around with media and do all kinds of interesting things. I encourage you, after you do this, take an image, upload it, and try experimenting with doing different operations on the image. So I'm just going to go and say extract 10 frames from this video, evenly spaced apart. This is something I would probably have to go and look up some command line tool. I know the tool I would use and figure out exactly the commands to do this from the command line, but it's a lot more fun and easier to just do this with Code Interpreter. So it goes and generates the code to go and extract the 10 images. And this is super useful. Now I have the 10 images and I can download each of them right here and go and work with them. So that in itself is a super useful thing. If I have some image or I have some movie or some audio file and I want to extract something from it, I want to get a segment of the video. I don't want the whole thing, or I want to chop off the start and end, something like that. Now, there's a limit to how big of files you can upload, but you can do pretty sophisticated things and you can get away with a lot. So I'm going to say just go and display these 10 images so I can get a sense of what the images look like that it pulled out, and it generates this nice graphic displaying the 10 frames that it has extracted, and we can look at each one of them and see what they are. Now, what I've decided I want to do is something you've seen a lot on the internet. It's kind of a fun little thing to go and do, and that is I want to go and resize these things, modify them some, and turn them into an animated GIF. So I'm going to start off by just telling it. Now, if you imagine you had like 100 images you need to resize, this is super effective. I'm just going to say resize each image, maintain the aspect ratio to 300 pixels wide. So if you have a bunch of operations you want to apply to an image and you know how to describe it in text what you want, you can just go and put that in there. So I'm just going to say resize each image. And notice what I'm doing. I'm giving it a pattern to follow on each individual one. I'm saying resize each, and then I'm giving it the constraints I want. And this is going to be a pattern that you're going to see over and over. Is you're going to tell it what you want to do it, and you're going to give it constraints on what you want, and you want it to fill in the details and find a solution that works. Now, if you don't give it enough information, you may not get the final output that you want. In this case, I was very specific, maintain the aspect ratio. So I want the ratio between the height and width of the image to stay the same. Even if it's shrinking one dimension, it needs to also shrink the other dimension correspondingly. So I'm giving it the constraints that I need. And this is something you're going to do over and over, is you're going to give it basically whenever you interact with it and ask it to accomplish a task, a lot of times you're going to give it some constraints on what you want, but you're not going to specify everything. Because if you think about a conversation, a more efficient pattern in interacting with conversation is you want to give and just specify the important pieces in the conversation. So in your pattern of conversation or interaction, you're going to specify the important constraints that it needs to follow, but not everything. So the important information is what you provide, and then you let it infer and figure out the rest. Now, sometimes it's not going to be able to infer everything correctly, but you want to think about that. Put in the important pieces, but you don't need to specify everything unless you really do need to specify everything. So now it goes and it resizes each of the individual images. I could go and download this there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another transformation. And I'm going to show you how we can get more complex. I'm going to say convert all of the images to grayscale and increase the contrast 30%. So again, I'm telling it what to do on each image, and I'm giving it some constraints on how it's done. This is pretty explicit in this one, and so it then goes and reprocesses all of the images. Notice how useful this is. I'm going and applying in natural language an operation to a whole bunch of files. So when we've looked at it previously, we've done a lot of work where we look at extracting and pulling out information and reasoning about the information within files. In this case, I'm just working on the files themselves. I'm not actually pulling out, per se, information that it's reasoning about. I'm just going and having to apply different operations. And so this is a pattern of kind of usage where it is acting as like my intern, and it's applying tools to a set of files per my instructions. Whereas some of the other tasks that we've seen it doing, it's actually having to go and reason about what's within the files and how to work with it, and what that information means. This case, I'm just having to apply different tools to the files. So it's going and processing each frame. And now I'm going to say, combine the images into an animated GIF that flips to the next image at 1 second intervals. So very quickly, I'm going to go to a completely different product, and it goes through and it generates the image and creates the animated GIF. This is kind of fun. And now we get the result right here. So what we see is this nice little animated GIF of the images that have been extracted and the bike riding happening. And so this is kind of a fun way of going and processing media and getting something new out of it. So we can take a video and we can turn it into a series of images. We can do batch processing on those images. We can then take those images, combine them back into a new form of media, an animated GIF. But I'm also going to show you one other one. This is going to be really useful probably for a lot of people who are in business, sales, marketing. You can go and create PowerPoint. So I'm going to say turn the individual images into a PowerPoint presentation with 1 image per slide. Now, clue in, you could also go and like generate a bunch of visualizations from an Excel file and then put those visualizations into a PowerPoint, or add in text or whatever you want to do. But clue in, you can create PowerPoint, you can create Excel, all kinds of interesting things. I could also go catalog these images in a CSV. So if I wanted to say like, I want to track the source of the movie they came from, where in the movie they came from, I could go and do that. In this case, I've created a PowerPoint presentation. So now if we take a look, I'll open that up and show that to you. Now here's my PowerPoint presentation, and I can go and flip through the various slides that are the same images. So this isn't the GIF anymore. This is actually my PowerPoint presentation that I've created with these images. So that's a super useful thing we could go and do, is kind of turn it into PowerPoint, convert it in different types of media. We could also go catalog it, catalog all of the images in a CSV file with the name of the image, the movie, the name of the movie file that the image was extracted from, the time in the movie that it was extracted from, and the operations applied to it. So we could go do that. We could go and catalog all of our operations. So if we want to keep this all organized and we want to know where all this came from, we could have that. So it's going to go and generate this catalog, and then we'll have that. And we could go and, if we want to know where all this stuff came from, we want to know how we produced it, we want to be able to reproduce it, we want to be able to find those original images, maybe we want to do bigger versions of them, maybe when we want to apply different sets of operations, we could go and do all of that, and we have a nice CSV file to organize it. And so now we've got our CSV file that's been created, and we could go and download that file and begin working with it, keeping it cataloged. So this is really useful, kind of all the operations you want to see, going and taking media, doing all kinds of operations to reformat it, to restructure it, to resize it, adjust the colors, adjust the look and feel. We can go and then take it, turn it into different types of media, like an animated GIF. We can turn it into a PowerPoint presentation, but then we can also do the organizational aspect. So if we're doing this professionally, for example, a lot of times we need to know, where are all these assets? Where did they come from? How were they created? All of that type of metadata and cataloging can be really important, and we can automate a lot of those processes as well.